You're tuned in, tuned up, and ready to go. Welcome to Rias Shack, a weekly conversation about amateur radio, shortwave listening, and radio tech, hosted by Ria Gyro, N2RJ, and heard weekly on WRMI Legends Shortwave. And now, here's your host, Ria.
Well, hello, my friends and listeners to WRMI Legends on 5050. This is Rias Shack on a Thursday. Yes, we have a new schedule. We have a new time. Check it out at WRMILegends.com, and you can find all the information. You can also check out our Facebook group, WRMI Legends Fan Club. So this week we have an interesting show. You know, there have been several items in the news regarding some of the government's challenges and how it relates to amateur radio and things they can help us do and things they've kind of had problems with. But anyway, welcome to Rias Shack. This show is a conversation about amateur radio every week, and I encourage you to listen here on WRMI Legends. If you want to support the show, go on to WRMILegends.com, and you can also check out Rias Shack YouTube, which I will talk about, and you can catch up all the great things we're doing. I'm going to Europe next week, and it's going to be real interesting. I'm going to be at Ham Radio Friedrichshafen, and we're going to see a lot of how they do ham radio in Europe. And I'll have special reports on that as well. But this week, there are a few items in the news that we're going to talk about. One of them is the shutdown of the universal licensing system. Apparently there's some software glitch involved. And the other one is new legislation that could help ham radio. And I'll explain some of the nuances behind that. Okay. Always glad to have you along for the ride, but of course we got to take a break and come right back. You love the news on Rias Shack, you're going to absolutely love the news on Rias Substack. So to go to n2rj.substack.com, where you'll find the news, views, and opinions, and all sorts of interesting angles that you will find nowhere else. n2rj.substack.com. It's a weekly newsletter. It's absolutely free. You can sign up. You can tell your friends. You can learn about all the happenings in ham radio for the past week. And, some interesting news, views, opinions, and commentary, which you'll really not find anywhere else. n2rj.substack.com. n2rj.substack.com. We put it in your inbox once a week. And you get a convenient digest to read everything you need to know about amateur radio. n2rj.substack.com, n2rj.substack.com. Be sure to subscribe. So this week we experience essentially the universal licensing system being completely shut down. And I don't even think this was planned, to be honest. It probably started out as a planned event, and it ended up as an unplanned event. So what happened essentially is that on Friday at June 9th at 6:30 p.m. Eastern, they had technical issues on the FCC ULS, the Universal Licensing System. And essentially what this meant is that the FCC could not process any licenses, amateur or otherwise, or any filings, even you can't even, I think you couldn't even go online and look up licensing. So nothing with antenna structures, anything. And what I was told essentially is they might have been doing some software maintenance or upgrade, and probably something took longer or went wrong or something. I've seen this time and time and again. I mean, I do this stuff for a living, by the way. So I've seen what goes on. Sometimes your best plans, and then oops, something happens, and then it just goes down. But this has been a challenge, and thankfully what the FCC has done is they've said that how they're going to extend the deadline. It's not quite clear if amateurs who have licenses that are expiring and they're unable to file a renewal, whether they're still keep their privileges. I believe that's the case, because the FCC says they're extending deadlines for regulatory filings in ULS and the ASR, because nobody will be able to make electronic filings. And a lot of people are asked, well, why can't I just mail it in? Because the FCC, well, you can't, because the FCC wants everything electronic. And amateur radio, I believe, was almost pretty much the very last service to go fully online. All commercial, everything. According to David Siddall, who is the lawyer at the ARL for the FCC regulatory stuff, he basically said how amateur radio is the very last. I know a lot of hams were not happy about that, but I think for better, for worse, electronic filing is good. What we should do, though, is we should have ham clubs step up to help people do their electronic filing. All well and good. Now, the FCC's systems, if you look at their website, I mean, their website seems pretty ancient. Not as ancient as the ARL, because the ARL's website is pretty ancient, I could tell you that. They're running on a really old system. And a lot of things are not configured properly. I'll tell you that. I used to run web services for for Fox News, essentially. And the amount of things we had to do to make things pretty much good, it's a huge undertaking. And there are a lot of things. I've seen best practices that are not followed. Now, the FCC, if you look at their website, they have like a whole mishmash of where you have old and new parts of the website. And to be honest, it doesn't really look the best. And they've been in transition for a long time. And little bits and pieces are getting upgraded. So that's some of the challenge. But, I do think that if you look at somebody like the UK regulator Ofcom, their website's modern and, dare I say, very efficient, ofcom.org.uk, because I have a UK license as well, too. And you go online and you have a lot of interesting stuff there. And they have a lot of consumer-centric focused stuff. They have news and everything. And they have, the FCC has some of that, too. But they generally, they've modernized a lot of things. I think that the FCC probably needs to step up some of what they're doing. And they're probably doing that, to be in all honesty. And it's probably one of the things that caused their outage. But things just seem to have not moved on. The other thing we're seeing, too, is the ARL is actually starting back with this legislation to remove private land use restrictions on amateur radio. So what happened is that the ARL has been fighting for a long time for Congress to pass legislation, and that legislation would essentially overrule homeowners associations and force them to make reasonable accommodations. I wouldn't say force, I would say, it would require them to make reasonable accommodations for amateur radio. You're not going to get 200-foot towers in a subdivision, perish the thought. You might get a flagpole antenna. You might get a 43-foot vertical in your backyard. You might get a VHF antenna that looks like a TV antenna. And all of these things are in the legislation. So I think this is a good effort. And this, I will tell you, this effort is pretty much due to the hard work of the Legislative Advocacy Committee, John Robert Stratton, N5AUS, and also Fred Hoppengarten, K1VR. The late Jim Teamstra was also on there, but as you know, he passed away. He was tapped for ARL president at one time, and he was a very interesting person. I think he would have made a great ARL president. Unfortunately, due to some internal politics in the election, he was not elected, and they re-elected Rick Roderick for another term. But I would have loved to see Jim Teamstra as president. I think Jim would have been absolutely great. But unfortunately, he passed away. And him passing away had two things. Basically, we didn't have him on the board anymore, and then we had Kristen McIntyre become the director of the Pacific Division. So anyway, that aside, I wish them all the best in this effort. And John and Fred, they're really doing yeoman's work. And Congressman Bill Johnson and Joe Courtney, they are the sponsors of this bill, HR 4006, and they have to remove the private land use restrictions. The ARL has been after this for a long time. A lot of people seem to think that how they should not continue with this and how they should abandon its efforts. I think they should continue with this efforts, not for the fact that HOAs are pretty much everywhere. You cannot really buy a new house in town without buying into an HOA. And I think this is essentially, these private governments have essentially run amok and regulate everything from the color of your front door to the types of vehicles you could park in your driveway. You know, if you have a pickup truck, a work truck, in some HOAs, you can't even park it in the driveway. So this goes well beyond antennas, and I do hope that they get some relief from that. With that said, I do expect some opposition. I do expect that CAI, the Community Associations Institute, will come back again, and then they will essentially try to block this bill. They might be successful, they might not be successful, but we have to try. And we need hams to get out in force, and we need hams to go and write their members of Congress to support this legislation and to put it forth. And I think that is a good thing. So that's good. And you know, governments have always, the FCC and others, they like amateur radio, contrary to popular belief that they think, that some people think we are a nuisance. And it's not true. We are vital, and they like having us around for several reasons. Emergency communications being one of them. But also there's a greater push for STEM, for science, and for bringing the space program to kids. And amateur radio is the best vehicle to do that. I do think, though, that they need to meet us halfway. And by meeting us halfway is that, I will say this, they need to be reasonable in some of these spectrum proceedings. You know, the wireless companies ask for spectrum, they bid on his auctions in the millions of dollars, and they get exclusive use to spectrum that they might not even use, you know, and it's not that they don't use it, it's just that they get licenses for spectrum out in the middle of nowhere that hams might want to use, but that the wireless companies take years to build out. There needs to be some degree of spectrum sharing, I think. You know, we can peacefully coexist. A lot of our spectrum in the microwave bands and SHF is already pretty much secondary, so we're not really, you know, how should I put it? We're not really unaccustomed to this type of arrangement. But, you know, we definitely need to have that. And then hams also need to get into the act. I do think that maybe hams should get on the microwave bands a little more. You know, the VHF contest, it was nice to see the rovers out and about and making contacts. It's nice to see ICOM with his newest radio, the 905. That is a great little radio. It's nice to see Flex Radio with all of the equipment to handle transverters and stuff like that. It's nice to see the others getting the act. It's nice to see small little companies doing a lot of things with these bands. It doesn't extend only to those bands, but also the HF bands. We need to use HF. We need to use HF. And, you know, we need to use it in a meaningful manner. We also need to see how we can encourage people to get on amateur radio. And we need to encourage youth. Yes, I know some people say, well, you know, you want to encourage older people with money. I'm like, no, you don't need to encourage them, okay? Because they are already plenty encouraged, right? With that said, if you have friends, bring them along, you know? Don't confine your outreach activities just to people who have money, who are retired and such like that. You bring it to everybody. And I found that kids actually are more interested in the STEM aspect of amateur radio. They're not, they might be bored by your RagTunet. They might be bored by DXing, but they love launching balloons. They love launching contacts toward the space station. They love working satellites. They might even enjoy contesting, you know, so it's a lot of different things. So, you know, try to put yourself in their shoes and see what they are. I mean, there is competition from the video games and everything, but it's not insurmountable. I can tell you that. So there are ways to enjoy amateur radio. And I involve kids in a lot of things. And amateur radio is one of them. I volunteer at one school, and I'm actually going to start up a radio club at another school. So if you can devote that time, by all means, do it. So anyway, so these are the challenges, and I hope that we overcome them. And I wish my friends John Robert Stratton and Fred Hopengarden the best, because they are the main drivers behind this effort. Okay, let's come back with the news right here on Rias Hamshack. So, one of the great things about having an HF radio is the ability to work DX. But you need to know where you can find this DX. And you can actually find all the latest news, tips, tricks, scuttlebutt, and on-the-scene reports at DX-World.net. That's DX-World.net. My friend Call and his fabulous crew of correspondents bring you all the latest DX news from around the world right into your ham shack. Okay, so check out DX-World.net, and they also supply the news here on Rias Ham Shack. So if you want to get the source of the news, you go to DX-World.net. That's DX-World.net. Okay, and we're back. And the news taken from the Substack. So we are going to have some news items from the Substack, and you can find it from n2rj.substack.com. So the first bit of news, of course, is that we're changing schedule. WRMI Legends is changing the schedule, and you can find out more at WRMILegends.com. So essentially, WRMI Legends will now broadcast starting on 9 p.m. Eastern or 8 p.m. Central on 5050 kilohertz, and then shift at midnight Eastern or 11 p.m. Central to 9455 kilohertz. So previously, the station would broadcast from 6 p.m. Eastern, that's 5 p.m. Central, to midnight on 5050. And this change will allow more coverage into the West Coast and Central America and the Pacific. So more, better coverage, right? Of course, WRMI Legend runs a the greatest hits and also the oldies, playing music from several decades, such as the 60s, 70s, and 80s. You'll have several DJs who play the hits, some of your favorite DJs. And you will also hear messages to the people of Ukraine and Russia recorded by listeners via call and telephone line. So you can listen to the live stream as well on WRMILegends.com or via your ALEXA smart speaker. So you say, and I'm not going to say it, you say ALEXA, play WRMI Legends, right? So that's ALEXA, and you basically say the word, don't spell it out, play WRMI Legends. And of course, Rias Ham Shack is moving to 9 p.m. Eastern or 8 p.m. Central on Thursday, which is 0100 UTC on Friday. And we did talk about the FCC ULS. So the FCC ULS has been unavailable since 6:30 p.m. on Friday, June 9th, according to a notice that is due to technical difficult issues that the agency anticipates resolving in the near term. Google smart speakers are down for the count, at least for us radio people. So Google, who has had several models of Google Home smart speakers, has made changes to how these speakers can be programmed. On June 13th, Google has sunset an app development feature called Conversational Actions, which used to allow speakers to be programmed to provide custom voice-first experiences to smart speaker users. Of course, unexpected collateral damage from this are radio stations who previously used conversational actions to play streaming audio from their radio stations. A suitable replacement is the media action, but as of now, Google has not opened that up beyond a small set of providers. Radio stations have the option of third-party streaming apps such as TuneIn, but that's not a perfect solution, as TuneIn has changed the model of accepting new stations in its catalog. And yes, we are suffering that at WRMI Legends. I really wish there was an easy solution, but we will keep a lookout for it, and we'll definitely let you know. You can sign up on the Facebook group, official WRMI Legends fan club, and you'll find out all the latest news. Of course, the ALEXA speakers still work. They're easy to use and easy to program. And I set up that, where you say ALEXA play WRMI Legends, and it will play WRMI Legends. And of course, we did cover the news about the legislation, and I will talk in brief. So let's talk about the actual full story here. So Congressman Bill Johnson and Joe Courtney, so Ohio and Connecticut, they've reintroduced the bill in the U.S. House of Representatives, H.R. 4006, and this bill if passed, will remove private land use restrictions that prohibit, restrict, or impair the ability of amateur radio operators from operating and installing reasonable antennas on property that they own or control. So Congressman Johnson has introduced the legislation last year, and then it's been reintroduced this year. It's called the Amateur Radio Emergency Preparedness Act, and it's designed to do just that. It's designed to get amateur radio operators reasonable antennas so they can be prepared for amateur radio emergency communications and training, and to promote education in STEM subjects related to critically needed wireless technology. So this is a great thing. There are several reasons why amateur radio should be federally protected. One of them, of course, is emergency communications, and it is important. It's not the only thing we do, but it's a good thing we do. We have also STEM education. I think that is great that STEM education was mentioned, because a lot of kids now, they might want to get into STEM, but they might see it as basically just coding, and you have a lot of engineering fields that are kind of left lacking. Amateur radio gives them a critical on-ramp into wireless technology, and wireless technology is pretty much what drives society today. A lot of the innovations in society today have at least some tie-in to wireless technology. I mean, you look at things like Bluetooth, you look at things like 5G, and I always mention 5G. You have Ted Rappaport, N9NB, who was the major driver behind millimeter wave being used for 5G. And you have New York University School of Engineering, of which I'm alumni. They are pretty much on the forefront of wireless research. But, amateur radio not only brings that into the colleges and universities, but it also brings it into a fun thing that people can enjoy. So, you might want to get into a field, but you know what? You might think, well, nah, that's so boring. And then you get into ham radio and realize, wow, it's fun. And there's so many things you can do in ham radio. I'm getting involved in satellites. Maybe I'll do a future show on satellites. But when I go to Europe, I want to try out some satellite communications, but I'm saving that for an upcoming show, okay? And that's going to be interesting, so watch this space. So anyway, as their actions during recent natural disasters such as Hurricane Sandy proved, amateur radio operators in Connecticut can be a critical component of disaster response and emergency management. It's in our community's best interest that we give them capabilities to operate at the highest level. And with reintroduction of this bill, we've taken a strong step in that direction. So that's Congressman Courtney in Connecticut. And ARL, of course, as I mentioned, the ARL Legislative Advocacy Committee, that's John Robert Stratton and Fred Hoppengarten and others too, but they are the main drivers behind this, and they're very skilled. Fred wrote the book on antenna zoning. I wish he was still director, because he was pretty, sharp with this stuff. So he is definitely one of the drivers. And get his book. His book is good. I actually have the latest edition of his book. So this next one comes from FCC Today, and you can go to fcc.today, and that's Michi Bradley, and she has a page called Dingers, which lists like current FCC enforcement actions. I've kind of been looking at this and thinking to myself, man, the FCC is doing a lot of enforcement. So this one is Stacy Snell of Utica, New York, and a notice of unlicensed operation and notification of harmful interference. And basically the FCC received a complaint from Herkimer County Office of Emergency Services, Herkimer County, concerning harmful interference and unauthorized transmissions on the frequency 155.610 megahertz used for police dispatch communications in Herkimer County, New York. On March 24, 2023, an agent from the Columbia office of the FCC Enforcement Bureau investigated and determined Stacy Snell was making unauthorized transmissions and causing harmful interference on the frequency of 155.610 from his residence in Utica, New York. The commission's records show that no license was issued for his operation on the public safety frequency 155.610 in the Utica, New York area. Well, of course, see, what kind of license is he going to have? So he explained radio stations must be licensed. The FCC explained the only exception is for certain transmitters operating at power levels, Part 15. Of course, he's not doing Part 15. And they gave him 10 days from the date of this notice, to respond. And the response should describe the steps you're taking to avoid operating on unauthorized frequencies and preventing future interference. Yeah. So this is serious business, folks. I mean, interfering with hams is one thing, but when you interfere with the police, you are pulling the tiger's tail. And you do not want to go there. There was a similar person in New York who did the same thing. Actually, downstate New York, New York City. Danny DeLeese, he was one of the people. He actually got arrested and he served time for making threats against police officers on the NYPD radios. So you do not want to do that. But I'm interested to know what kind of equipment he's using. It's so easy to procure equipment like, not beating up on Baofeng, but so many of these radios that you get from the Far East that are able to just transmit out of the box on unauthorized frequencies. It's just so easy to just go on Amazon or AliExpress or Temu. I have a thing or two to say about Temu. And you buy one of these radios and you transmit away. Yeah, so... but it's good that the FCC is doing enforcement. They actually do respond pretty quickly to people who are interfering with public safety. One of my friends, unfortunately, and he was a New Jersey correctional officer, and he was injured on the job, and I think he's never been the same ever since, so I have sympathy for him. But he got on the radio of his first aid squad and made some noises of the sad trombone, and they reported him. And then they took away his ham license, and they gave him, they fined him. So that's serious business. So here is a story. And I always say to people that how hurricanes don't just happen in the Atlantic hurricane season. We also have typhoons and other storms and severe weather events in other parts of the world. So this one is about Cyclone Joy, packing speeds of up to 140 kilometers an hour. This is from republicworld.com. This is an Indian newspaper. So Bipar Joy is packing winds of up to 140 kilometers per hour and threatens to cripple communication networks after landfall on the Gujarat coast on Thursday evening. So Gujarat's in India. Authorities have turned to ham radio for smooth exchange of information. Learning from past experiences, Gujarat State Disaster Management Agency has deployed 6 ham radio teams, 2 of them in Kutch, and mobile units for seamless communications after Bipar Joy hits the shore near Jakhau Port. All right. And of course, they say ham radio is considered a reliable mode of messaging during emergencies when wire lines, mobile phones, and other traditional terrestrial means of communication fail. And they have 6 teams here. Really good. So I hope they don't suffer much damage. But when that cyclone lands, of course, it's going to be disaster. I mean, they're going to lose things like cell towers, and poles are going to come down, and the telephone networks are pretty fragile. But you will see ham radio come up and pick up the slack. So, hey, I really hope that they don't suffer much damage. But like I said, I hope they have ham radio to power through. And looking for more of this story. Hopefully they don't get too much damage here. But, this is an important thing. Even if you're not, like me, I'm not a big emergency communications person. But I still realize that it's important. And I still try to ensure that I am ready. I took all my FEMA courses and everything. So I took the FEMA IS 100 and the other courses. And I have those training And there are other training. I used to be an MCOM trainer with the ARL for a long time ago, and I've been involved in this for a long time. But, it's not the main activity I do in ham radio, but it's something good to do. All right. And then Field Day is coming up, of course. So Field Day is the largest, is probably one of the largest ham radio events in North America, I will say. It's probably not the largest in the world, but it's the largest in North America, where you have a lot of stations go out into the field, and they go out into parks, they go out into public places, and they go also to emergency operation centers, and they operate from there. And some people operate from home. I'm going to be probably operating remotely from home if Optimum keeps my internet on, because Optimum is very well known for having internet outages. If you see me on Facebook, you know what I mean. Yeah, they have been terrible. I mean, I've experienced near daily outages with Optimum online. I'm going to call them suboptimum offline. They're owned by Dutch company Altice. So provided the internet stays up, I'll probably be online and operating remotely from Germany. And I will be operating One Echo because I have home batteries. I have batteries that power my house, and those will be a pretty good test. I did the same thing last year, but I'm going to keep the power down this year. So good luck in Field Day. I hope everybody has a good time, whatever you operate in. And remember, the key to ham radio is having fun. You don't want to do ham radio if you're not having fun. And it's always a good idea to have a good time. So the other piece of news is from the RSGB. The President, John McCullough, GI4BWM, he received a very warm welcome when he attended the IRTS AGM Gala Dinner, and this is from the RSGB. He had talked about the challenges faced by national societies, and as well as the success of RSGB Tonight at 8 live webinars, and also online exams. So the UK got online exams, and he also stressed the importance of engaging young people in amateur radio, and schools and universities. They gave him even a spot on page 10 of their newsletter, CR News, the Ham Radio Ireland magazine. And he is from Northern Ireland, right? So pretty good. Very nice. So I hope they do some great things, of course. And relations between Great Britain and Ireland have not been so hot over the years, but hopefully there is room for healing. Of course, shifting gears to DX, Deuce Island is pretty much underway. Team VP6A, and this is courtesy of DXWorldnet. You have Deuce Island with their radios in a box, and they have the radios in a box, and they have the operators are remotely on the ship, and they're pretty much doing great there. They've been working a lot of FT8 and also other modes such as CW and single sideband, and they're also doing 160 and 6 meters and all the bands. So pretty good to hear them. Of course, in periods of slow activity, FT8 frequencies will be used. All right, great news. And they've been active for about 36 hours, and they have the log up on Club Log. Yesterday they had about 10,000 QSOs. So pretty good. Always good to hear this. And I think this is a safer way to do de-expeditions, using their radios in a box. It's controversial, but I don't think it's heavily controversial. I think it's safe. And if you're looking for Chatham Islands, you're looking for ZL7 stroke SP5 EAQ in the Chatham Islands. And he's finalizing preparations for a new one-man expedition to Chatham. And he will arrive in October 2023, October 20th, staying for 2 weeks, including CQ Worldwide SSB. And he'll be active on 10 to 80 meter bands. So good for him. And SSB only, though. He also have a website, and we'll see how things go. Pretty nice. Thanks to call from DX-World.net. Of course, on Rockall, Cameron is still on the island. He's trying to break a record to raise funds for charity. It's been foggy, but he's still there. And lots of great stuff. So if you want a lot of great news, DX-World.net. They have a lot more. There's Swains Island coming up for W8S. That's going to be coming up soon. And if you need Swains Island as a new one, I work them, but I need some band fills. They're going to be arriving on the 4th of October and depart on 17th of October. They'll have 4 new members on the team because some couldn't join due to circumstances. So they have DJ9RR, DL2AMD, DL6JGN, Adrian, KO8SCA, NG7M, PA2KW, PA3EWP, PA4WM, PA5X, and also PG5M. And of course, due to COVID, the costs have increased. So the total cost for that trip is 125,000 euros. So if you want to consider increasing your donation, that will help. You can go to swains2023.com to find more information about the D expedition. Okay, so that is the news that we have time to fit for this week. Let's come back with Q&A, which is your favorite questions and answers right here on Rias Ham Shack. All the ways to listen to Rias Ham Shack, let me count the ways. The first and the best way is, of course, on WRMI Legends 5050 on your shortwave dial and other frequencies as appropriate. You can also listen on the podcast wherever you get your favorite podcasts. You can listen on WRMILegends.com where we have it on the live stream. You can catch it on the Rias Ham Shack YouTube channel. Just look for youtube.com/@N2RJ. I publish a show, and it's always a few days after it airs on WRMI Legends. And if you want to get the show first, you go on WRMI Legends 5050 shortwave or on WRMILegends.com. Of course, you can also go on WRMILegends.com to find out ways to support the show and support the station and to keep the tubes glowing and keep the fabulous shortwave programming coming. Now back to Rias Ham Shack. So before I do Q&A, I always like to shout out good sponsors of WRMI Legends, and ARL Electronics is one of them. I just recently ordered a nice new radio from them that I'm going to be doing a YouTube video on, so I'm not going to tell you what it is, but it's a nice radio that I'm going to try out. And hint, hint, it's going to be in my car, in my Tesla Model Y. So anyway, today's Q&A, if you want to send questions to the show, you can send it to ria@n2rj.com. That's Romeo India Alpha at November 2 Romeo Juliet.com. So the first question deals with encrypting communications to satellites. And Scotty asked, he remembers he was studying with hamstudy.org. There was a specific question addressed that you can't encrypt unless you're sending commands to an amateur satellite. So it is on a technician test. And the answer is that generally you may not encrypt. You may not encrypt or obscure communications. So the FCC does not use the word encrypt, right? I believe they don't because it's not found in Part 97. So what they do is they said that in Part 97.113, prohibited transmissions, no amateur station shall transmit, and then ... music using a phone emission, except as specifically provided elsewhere in the section. And there are exceptions to that. Communications intended to facilitate a criminal act, messages encoded for the purpose of obscuring their meaning, except as otherwise provided herein. So, a message encoded for the purpose of obscuring its meaning. So this essentially means encryption. You can't use encryption. It doesn't specifically ban encryption, but it bans everything where you obscure the meaning. The exception, of course, and the exception says a space telecommand station. A telecommand station may transmit special codes intended to obscure the meaning of telecommand messages to the station in space operation. And the reason for this is quite obvious. If you have telecommand of a space station, like for example a satellite that you want to turn off and on, or you want to, I don't know, it might have thrusters or something, although I kind of doubt it, some of them, these small satellites that amateurs use. But if you have satellites, well, you don't want anybody just taking their baofeng and pushing up some DTMF tones and then completely controlling your satellite. Now, do you? No, you don't want that. So they do allow you to transmit special codes to obscure the meaning, and they do allow you to use encryption on the bands for amateur satellites. That's one of the few exceptions. And speaking of exceptions, there are other exceptions to other things, like, for example, pecuniary interests, making money. There are exceptions. Astronauts, of course. But the most famous one is teachers. So a teacher who, a control operator, may accept compensation as an incident of a teaching position during periods of time when an amateur station is used by that teacher as a part of classroom instruction at an educational institution. So that means that a teacher during class time can use amateur radio to teach students, and they have the control operator. I explained this in a previous show. All right, so that is the first question. Then Chris asked, well, the SWR in his Comet CP9 has jumped 2.53. If it's easy way to tell if it's the antenna or the coax, well, there are some ways to tell. You can use a nano VNA, or you can use a Rig Expert antenna analyzer, and you can buy a Rig Expert from a lot of our sponsors of WRMI Legends, right? And you get one of those antenna analyzers, and has a function called a TDR, a time domain reflectometer. So you use that to go and basically see the faults along the cable. So R&L Electronics, who is a sponsor of WRMI Legends, they sell the Rig Expert analyzers, and they have a very handy TDR function, I could tell you. Like they have R&L has like the Rig Expert Zoom, they have the stick, they have all the others. And I personally have a Stick Pro, which is 100 kilohertz to 600 megahertz of antenna analyzer, and it's pretty good. Yeah, and you use that, and basically what it'll do like a graph, and you'll see like little bumps in a graph to tell you what happened. Now, if you have an antenna on the end, if you tell it's the antenna, you'll see like the cable is fine, but the cable will be mostly in a straight line, and then the antenna will be pretty much showing an error there. And you can also, one other thing you can also do is you'll have to go and take down the antenna and look, but like this person said, they don't have to do that. They don't want to do that. So that's pretty good. It could be a failed, it could be a failed internal joint, or if you have sections of coax that are joined together, and if you're using coax that's crimped, well, it could be a feed line failure. And, you can do that. Water in the coax actually is a problem as well too. Okay, so that's pretty good. And so Mark here asks, since I don't have a radio and SDR waterfall, I'm thinking of using a dongle to add SDR to Shack. I have an old vertical antenna that I'm thinking of putting up just for SDR. The antenna would be strictly received. Should I put an RF choke in the antenna? If you're not transmitting on the antenna, there's really no reason to put a choke on it, right? And you should ground and bond the antenna. So Jim Aspinwall, actually, NO1PC, he gave a good explanation here. He says if you're not transmitting on it, There is no chance of having RFI straight RF unless it's close to something that's transmitting. So a receive-only antenna should be treated like any other proper grounding, bonding outside the premises. And you can look there. The National Electric Code in the United States and also Canadian Electric Code and other countries' electrical codes often has information about grounding wire antennas, and you want to take a look at that as well. There's a book by Ward Silver, N0AX, called Grounding and Bonding for the Radio Amateur, which has a lot of information. Okay, so here's a practical question about contesting. If both, and many contests, part of their response is a serial number, from what I've read, if both operators do not submit a log, the contester will not get credit. But is that true? So that's generally not true. If you have a number of contacts that are in the log and a bunch of other people also have you in their log, chances are you're a legitimate station. So the contest organizers generally do not require you to submit a log for other stations to claim you as credit. There are exceptions, and one big exception is the Russian DX contest. So the Russian DX contest actually requires that both stations be in the log of each other before it'll be counted for credit. So bear that in mind. The next question: what is an easy to set up portable vertical antenna that can hold up to 50 watts digital? Well, 50 watts digital is not really a tall order. It might be in a portable antenna. So pretty much anything can handle that. I'm a big fan of the super antennas. They have super antennas MP1, and they're pretty good. And I have one. It has like a coil at the base that you can use. There's also like the buddy pole, which comes in a little carry bag, and you can use that. There are others. There is they have a hex beam now called the Buddy Hex. You can also get like an end-fed half-wave antenna, and with that antenna, what you can do is you can then get a separate fiberglass pole, and what you do is you hook the wire onto it, and then you extend the pole, and then you put that on up to a tree. Yeah, this guy who does a lot of POTA activations, parks on here, Mike Cade MRD, you can see some of his videos where he actually takes the pole and he just props it up against a tree, and he has the end-fed antenna. And he's good to go. He's making contacts on his 100-watt ICOM 7300, which he uses for his POTA activations. I have an ICOM 705 I use for my portable work. You know, ICOM makes some pretty good radios, and they're a sponsor of WRMI Legends. Next question. Someone mentioned in passing, that's the best kind of hearsay, that you put a drop of oil when connecting metal antenna sections. If this is necessary, what type of oil should be used? So I generally like to use, I don't like to use oil, right? I don't like to use oil. I will use anti-seize. I will use JetLube SS30. And JetLube SS30 for good reasons. Antenna manufacturers actually mention it, and it has little flakes of copper. And yeah, you know, some people say, well, you can't mix copper and aluminum. Well, if you mix in an anti-seize, you're not really mixing it with copper and aluminum. So this actually works very well and is recommended to prevent galling and to prevent antennas getting stuck, okay? And pieces of elements getting stuck together. So it's all good, right? Okay, next one here. I have a Hustler BTV6 or 6BTV. So that's a 6-band trap vertical antenna. I have a bunch of ground wires radials. Can I cover with some cobble rocks? I want to make a small rock garden around the antenna and have some landscape blocks. And the answer is absolutely. So unless these are raised radials, meaning they're elevated radials, you can have rocks on them. And the idea is that they will be on the ground anyway, and they will be affected by the ground. So putting rocks is not going to affect them. Period. That's really all there is to it. And there are people who actually put the radials down and then they have the grass grow over it. So you really aren't harming it by doing that. So that's always a good thing to do. And, you know, it's always good. So anyway, the club call trustee became a silent key in late April. In May, the club voted to appoint a new trustee, but the paperwork got lost in the shuffle. They have everything going, but don't think they'll have the paperwork into ARL and processed by the FCC in time for field day. So are they going to have an issue using a club call during field day? If the application is timely submitted, they're fine. I mean, club trustees die all the time. And as long as the club call is current. So the thing about club calls, club call signs, is that you, the control operator, are the one responsible for making sure that it's legal. Okay? So when you operate, you're operating using your station, your operator license, but the station license is the club station license. I operate under club station licenses all the time. When I'm at the school, Sussex Charter School, where I help out sometimes, I use their call sign. And, So Heather asks, other than Logbook of the World, is there an app that keeps track of your contacts with the various DXCC awards? Does QRZ have that feature anywhere? So QRZ has that feature for its own awards, for QRZ awards. Then you can also use logging software. I use Log4OM. Irony. I use Log4OM login software and keeps track of my awards. There used to be a really great one called DXBase, and DXBase kind of fizzled away. So then there is the one written by A6YQ, which is DX. What is it called? DX Labs. I'm not a fan, but some people like it. So. But I'm not a fan. And yeah, his fans will come and attack me now. Okay. So anyway, so your login software generally tracks awards. Club log, if you upload your logs to clublog.org, you will actually be able to see, you can track your awards. And they track a number of awards. And not only that, they track your awards against other people, so you can see how other people are doing. You also have a feature called log matching, which is where you upload a contact and then you check, and if somebody else upload their contact, you can see if you are in their logs. So that's a great feature. Of course, it's a blind match, meaning that that you're not going and seeing into their log. But if you have the same log data and it agrees, yeah, heck yeah, you can go and you can go and see whether you are in their log. So that's good. I had a bunch of them matched by LP1H. He might have done a big upload, and I had a whole bunch of log matched by them. I always look at my DXCC charts to see how well along I'm on the DXCC. I have 2,116 worked, and I have a whole bunch confirmed. Logbook of the World has records of my DXCC contacts, but it only has what's confirmed. Club log has what is worked. Of course, if you want other local software from Mac, and I use Mac, I'm using Mac to produce this show, and I use Rumlog NG. You look for dl2rum.de. It's written by a German fellow, and he produces software for free, and it's a very nice piece of software that he's using. So Rumlog. Rum, I think, his call sign is DL2RUM, so I should call it RUM log. But is it Rumlog? I don't know. But it is a very, very nice package, and I strongly, very highly recommend it. Okay, so next question. So the final question here is, this person's looking for a USB or serial or IP remote antenna switchers, 2 radios, 4 antennas, need the whole kit assembled. There are a number of them. 403A actually makes a bunch of them, and they make IP switches, meaning that they're operated via the internet. Also You have Array Solutions makes a 6-pack, and they use control wires and such like that. And there are a number of other ones as well. True, there's Mtron, and then there are others that, a lot of switchers have been made. They actually make them, and they have like what you call either BCD input, or they have input binary coded decimal, or they have an input for individual switches. And some of them, they put smarts in them. They put like either Ethernet interface or serial or something like that. So all good and good stuff. And, station control is a pretty interesting topic. There are a number of different ways to go about it. I see some hams are using Node-RED, and I'm not so sure. Node-RED's okay. I'm just not sure it's for me. I prefer other things. I actually built some of my own software. Maybe I'll talk about it in the show sometime or do a YouTube video. But there are many ways to do this, many ways to control your software and hardware in a ham shack. And usually what happens is that your components that you use already have some sort of remote input, and you're just interfacing a computer to them, or you're interfacing a rig. It doesn't even have to be a computer, because a lot of rigs have like the band decoding output that you can actually just connect to various other pieces of equipment, or amplifiers have it, or other piece of equipment has it. And some of them just basically match frequency. So, you don't have to have computers involved. I know some people are anti-computer for whatever reason. I mean, it's 2023, but, I can see the good and bad, by the way. I'm a computer professional. I've been involved for a long time. So I know computers can be benign. I know sometimes it could be downright evil. As mentioned, we are on a new time slot. So if you have reception reports, be sure to check out the Facebook group, WRMI Legends Fan Club. You can also email ria@n2rj.com. That's Romeo India Alpha at November 2 Romeo Juliet.com. And you can send your reports about the show, your thoughts, your questions, your answers, what you agree or do not disagree with, and also things that, you might have. I'm also looking for news tips for the newsletter, and let me know what's going on locally in your town or city with regards to ham radio. And finally, it is antenna maintenance season. I really want people to be safe. I want you, if you're climbing on top of your roof or climbing on top of antenna towers, make sure you have the proper safety gear and some training. A little bit of training won't hurt, because generally people, they might learn a thing or two. I'm involved in a number of activities where I take training for things, and it's always good to be in the know, so to speak. Finally, I want to say a prayer. If you have some extra prayers for my friend Phil, 2E0PLA. Phil's in the hospital right now. He's in England, and he's in the hospital, so he's not doing well. But, his daughter, Yasmin, is going to be out, giving us updates. But he's doing a little better, but, I was quite surprised. I hope that I hope that he comes out soon. I might see him in a couple of weeks in the UK. So we'll see how that goes. He did lose his daughter to cancer last year, and it was very tragic. The family has been very close to ours, and we traded Christmas gifts and such like that. So that's very sad. But, their prayer heals many things, and of course, keep him in your thoughts and prayers. All right, this has been Ria's Ham Shack right here on WRMI Legends. Would like to thank Ted and Holly for making the show possible right here on WRMI Legends. Also, the crew down at WRMI in Okeechobee, Florida. That is Jeff White and the crew down there, and everybody else who is on this fabulous radio station. And to all my friends everywhere around the world, and I will see some of you in Europe next week. I'm very excited to see some of you in Europe next week. I'm very excited. Until next time, my friends, I will see you later. This is Ria N2RJ saying peace and 73.